right. Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, June 13th, 2023 Scarborough Board of Education workshop. I'm sorry, July 13th, 2023 Scarborough Board of Education workshop. Diane, can we call the attendance, please?
Sure, I didn't think about that because we were having a joint workshop to start, so I am happy to do that. Mrs. Lindstrom.
Here.
Mr. Kelleher.
Present.
Let's see, who else is here? Miss Gammon.
Here.
Mr. Mayorino.
Here.
Miss Leong. Present. Mr. Peony Huff.
Because she's been excused.
And am I missing someone? Gosh.
Freyla.
Oh, Miss
Freyla,
Tarpinian.
Probably driving back.
Yeah, yeah.
My apologies again. I was thinking we were
Yeah,
joint workshopping and then would do things later. So
not at all.
here we are.
Here we are. All right, agenda item 3.0 is the Pledge of Allegiance. So would everyone please join me? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. All right, agenda item 4.0 is a joint workshop. 4.1 is an update on the unified school and the K through 8 strategic plan. So with this, I will go ahead, Lisa, do you want me to turn it to you now? Ready to, do you have the presentation uploaded or?
It's right in the slide deck.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let me sign in. Sorry.
I have it too. I'm happy to.
I don't know what I said.
Mm-hmm.
I can't share the screen. You'll have to share from there.
I have it on my computer, but that'd be
Do
easier.
you want to just do it on Lisa's computer? Or can you just share, make me share?
You should have.
Yeah, it says the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Go down to the bottom.
What if I make it?
There you go.
There we are. Thank you.
Are you able to do it now?
Mhm.
Okay,
All right, let me just go back.
Yeah.
Sure I have the right thing up. Okay. There we are.
Okay, great. So I guess I'll kick it off. Lisa and I will be going through the information sort of together tonight, but I think I just to start with a little bit of a recap of what the team's been working on over the past few weeks. We've really taken a lot of time to finalize, sort of the building layout, the elements of the building that are, imperative for us to have as part of the education program requirements. And that all has fed into sort of the quantity analysis that leads us into what we're able to provide tonight as an overall project cost, at least for the construction of the building and some of the associated components. So, this is, I think everybody's seen this, but just to kind of reiterate, the concept here is a unified solution that addresses both the overcrowding issue at the middle school, but also addresses the challenges at the three primary schools with capacity and building age conditions. So bringing in a new unified school K through 3 and doing limited renovations at the middle school. Next slide. So we talked a lot about design language. This has been sort of the, and I'll turn it over to Lisa here in a minute, but this has been sort of our guiding principles, I guess, in terms of the way that the project has been looked at from an educational perspective. It's what's been, it's what guided what is in the building, along with, you know, this is really encompassing and embracing everything that the staff and you know, the teachers have told us. And so with that, I guess let's turn it over to you, Lisa, to.
Yeah, just a quick recap, this along with the space allocation workbook, which is the detailed analysis of spaces. These talking points, design language came out of a multitude of forums. These forums included staff, they included teachers, they included community members. We also we had workshops with every school from K through 12 along these topics as well. And through that, we talked about educational priorities and goals, talked about architectural priorities. And then we start to arrive at the guiding principles through that dialogue. I'm taking a lot of work and summarizing it in probably one slide. There's hours and hours and probably about 12 different to 15 different community forums with the staff or the educational working group that had community members. So you can see the 7 guiding principles on the screen, and then design patterns are essentially 21st century design patterns or architectural solutions that support those guiding principles. And those two together, along with the design statement, which is kind of cut off at the bottom of the screen, but it reads an intimate community of innovative, flexible, and inspirational learning neighborhoods that fosters inclusivity, collaboration, and hands-on learning. So this, along with the space allocation workbook and the programming done with the staff, has really been what has driven the layout and design and all the decisions that have gone into this solution.
So we can talk a little bit about the site. I think we discussed it before. This parcel that is, you know, sort of the primary consideration, primary target right now is the Downs parcel. It's the area shown number 1 and number 2 there on the screen. The parcels in total, the upper parcel, which is sort of to the top of the screen, labeled number 1, is about 21 or so acres. The second parcel is about 3.8 acres, and that's right now primarily envisioned to be used for stormwater management. There is the possibility that we may be able to control our stormwater completely on the site, so on the parcel number 1 site. So we are going through the engineering exercise right now to understand if that's going to be possible, and if that's the case, then we may not need the second piece. So that's that number 2.
So let's clarify, we have gone through the engineering exercise, and Alice here to speak any more to that if we need him to, but we have determined that we can put stormwater on site 1, and that's
Great.
what is going to be represented in the total cost.
Great, late breaking news. So again, really what we'll be targeting is the parcel 1. Along the bottom of that parcel 1, it's a little difficult to see, will be a road network, and I think that's on the next slide if I'm recalling correctly. But right now the team is working to execute an option agreement by the end of the month, and there's a lot of work going on right now with the appraisals, and we're working through a lot of the details there with regard to land cost, you know, where does the work split happen in terms of utilities and what the expectations are with the parcel. So that work is all well underway. A lot of work and energy being poured into that with Tom and Don, John, others all involved in carrying those conversations forward. So this plan shows the anticipated layout of the school in the red block. And we'll talk more about this later. Parking areas and bus loop areas are to the right of the red block. The school will have sort of 2 entrances, and we'll talk about that here in a minute.
You go to the next slide, it will show that.
Yep.
Detail.
The traffic will be brought into the site. If we can go back to that slide for just a minute, I just want to cover that. Traffic is envisioned to come into the site via 2 roads. So road B won't be a sort of a primary road. It's going to be more of a service road that will provide access to community services entrance and also a maintenance / deliveries entrance on the back of the school. Everything to the right is going to be, like I said, the parking, the bus loop entrance, and that'll all be fed by Road A. Road A will be connected to Payne Road and to the rest of the Downs development via the existing entrances. But also it's envisioned that there will be some type of an entrance via Trackview Terrace onto Sawyer Road, and that again is being sort of worked out right now. So sewer extensions will be required. So we'll be utilizing an existing pump station within the Downs. Sewer would be extended to the property line along with power, natural gas, and municipal water.
And the school faces which way?
So
If you look at the school.
Yeah, so the school is south. I don't know if you can point to it there on the screen, but
that's.
yep, south space is, so it's oriented towards the parking lot area.
Thank you. Slide.
This is a little bit more of a zoomed in view of the parcel and the layout of the school. You'll notice that on the front, towards the top of the screen on the right-hand side is the lower school entrance. So this is, the lower grades. Again, trying to create some distinction in almost two separate schools. And then there'll be the upper entrance, which will be grades 2 and 3. So, again, trying to divide the traffic flow, trying to create a more, manageable feel for kids that come into the schools. And it also helps with safety. We don't have any more children crossing car lanes and cars crossing traffic paths and pedestrian paths. So lots of nice improvements there. There's also been a lot of attention paid to how the community may use the school. So you notice on the lower left side of the page there is a community entrance. That's important to note in the sense that not only has that been sort of set up as a way for us to congregate community traffic into that area, it's also been set up so this inside the school so that the school can be segregated in a sense if there is an overlap in times or after hours. It makes it easier for the school staff and Todd and his team and community services to sort of control where access is happening and sort of keep the school secure for those community uses. Upper left-hand corner is a service entrance. So this is where deliveries would be coming in and out. This is going to be food service, food coming, food materials, cooking materials coming in and out, deliveries. So it's nice to have that sort of on the periphery of the school. Again, helps us to create sort of dedicated areas for specific functions without having to utilize the parent drop off, the bus entrance, and it sort of keeps each specific use to its intended purpose.
I will clarify, as you scroll down, there is a misnote on the bottom. It should say stormwater is on site, parcel 1 and not parcel 2. Originally, that stormwater was off site on parcel 2. It is now on site. I'll invite Al to speak a little bit about where that stormwater is on parcel 1.
So currently they were looking at 4 different locations. As some of the council may be aware, the town is part of the MS4 permitting through the EPA, and there's regulations that have been advanced that likely will require more decentralization of stormwater as part of the local ordinances over the next 12 months. And working with the town engineer in evaluating how we could break up the stormwater. We're looking at 4 different areas. To the south or the right of the entrance drive, you see a slightly darker green area. That would be a gravel wetland. So we would be doing both water quantity and water quality treatment within that area. Within the infield of the bus loop, that would be either a infiltration gallery for the roof runoff or another gravel wetland. It'll depend on the final elevation of the building, and the depth of the groundwater. We have one test pit within that area right now, and we'd probably be leaning more towards the second gravel wetland for that area. And then the two parking areas on the north side of the building that were Dana reviewed would have separate stormwater facilities. They would be a treatment device, mechanical treatment device that would do the water quality aspects, and then chambers that would provide the quantity aspects, so that we're kind of breaking up those areas, treating those separately. But the combination of those four locations allows us to not have to purchase any portion of parcel 2 or do any of the stormwater on parcel 2. And we were trying to do that, recognizing the land cost associated with parcel 2.
Correct. So you will see, for those who have been following along with the cost updates, you will see an adjustment in the cost to recognize that, because that work has now been brought into parcel 1 and is no longer an off-site cost. It's brought into the total project cost for the building and site improvements on parcel 1. However, to Al's point, that means we do not need to purchase parcel 2. So it's just a movement, those dollar amounts, and likely less because we don't have to purchase that way.
Before we leave this slide, a couple last notes that I think are important. You notice there's 2 playgrounds, one playground for the lower school, another playground for the upper school. This helps to sort of create a separation between the different age ranges. Creates, I think, a more manageable space for staff to monitor. Also, in the middle of the school, you'll notice a couple of blocks. These are courtyards, and it's envisioned that these courtyards would be really kind of tactile learning spaces. Not necessarily just a grass, open area, but a place where kids can get in and engage in lots of different activities can be accommodated. So
We've talked a lot about the robust gardening programs and how those would be envisioned in these secure courtyards.
Out of curiosity, what are the dimensions of the courtyards?
I don't know the footage as in, but they are, I want to say that the larger ones are about 8,000 square feet and the smaller ones about 3 to 5. So they are significantly less than the Wentworth.
Yeah.
And we've broken down the scale, so there's multiple of them, so they're more intimate.
can you jump to the next slide? So Lisa, I'll let you kind of take us through this one with a lot of good work here with sort of how it's organized. I will say that this got massaged a couple different times with a lot of input from police department, fire, and all of our public safety officials, along with town staff and multiple folks from the school department. So with that, I'll let you kind of.
Yeah. If you just scroll down a little bit so we can see where the entrances are, Shannon, or up, I'm sorry. Wrong direction. So essentially the way that the school is set up is it's a school within a school. And it's meant to truly be a school within a school. The idea being that the K-1 classrooms are on one side of the building, the 2-3 are on another. They have separate entrances for the start of the day. If the school decides they want to maintain one entrance after school starts, that can be done. And we've set up the upper primary as sort of that more main entrance for visitors after school arrives. That said, the kids will have separate entrances to arrive and depart the school. On the left-hand side, we have the lower primary school, on the right, the upper primary school. In the middle are those spaces that are shared. So admin, library, gym, cafeteria, and then we have the special classes, the art, the STEM, the music. These are all off of what we call a main street. And the idea being that there's this main street that all these services can be accessed from the students. There is a lower school main street, there's an upper school main street. So the school has the flexibility to create all of those as shared spaces or really delineate them as separate spaces if they'd like. The reason that's done this way is really so that we reinforce that school within a school, but we can also, where you see those dashed dot lines, those are where the firewalls are. So in architectural design, we have to pay attention to the square footage, and after a certain square footage, we have to introduce firewalls. The reason we put them here and are intentional about them is that the classroom wings can be closed off. So thinking about from a safety and security standpoint and other reasons, That is a great advantage to be able to do that. Another firewall that is not indicated with a dashed dot line happens just north of that blue gym square. And that is where we were talking about all the community spaces, which are page south. That's where those other firewalls are. So we can close that off. So we're thinking about that as we're laying out this building to make sure that we're thinking about how the building can be separated for all sorts of different reasons, as well as make sure that these spaces are available to the either the after hours. So we do have the separate community entrance at the back. The orange box that is kind of faded out, that is the community service office and storage. That's strategically placed to have visual to that parking lot as parents are dropping off, as well as to be positioned right in between the two gyms cafeteria, so they have great visibility of all of those spaces. And then building services are to the left as well. The library is in the middle of the school. A lot of the programming in the visioning workshops we did, there was a lot of talk about how the library is the heart of the school. And so making sure that that is in the middle of the school and celebrated as the heart. And then the courtyards are, they are secure outdoor learning spaces, but they are also providing daylight into those classrooms that are interior. And they serve as a wayfinding device. So when you're in the building and you're traveling the classroom neighborhoods, as you turn the corner to the next one, you get a visual connection to that courtyard. And then as you go to the next one, you keep referring back to those courtyards. So it's very easy to understand where you are. And we have a library courtyard and two classroom, lower and upper school.
You know what the total footprint is in terms of square feet, acres? And you thought you do both, right?
So the footprint, like the total square footage of the building itself?
Yeah.
Or the footprint?
The footprint.
I don't remember what the footprint is off. I work off of total square
Well,
footage.
whatever number you have.
Yeah, so, let me reference my exact.
And
number
sorry,
here.
I just,
Yeah, it's 193,572 square feet. First and second floors.
192,000.
193,572.
And that's both floors.
That's
So then as we go to the second floor, which is the next slide. This is where we have the classrooms stacked on top of the lower classrooms. Couple things to note is you can see future additions at the end of each of these. Making sure that we're thinking about not running any utilities in these locations and making sure that structurally that we can design the building to be able to do additions in these locations. And that way we don't get into the same situation that some of our existing schools where we can't add on in the future if we need to. We have positioned playgrounds in these areas so that playgrounds can be close to the building. If those additions do need to happen, more than likely it would be at a time to which we would be replacing equipment. So that was a strategic decision. And then another thing to note are reinforcing this idea of the classroom neighborhood. So the classrooms are in groupings of 6 or 3. Again, trying to break down that scale for the kids. So they operate within a grouping of 6 classrooms or 3 classrooms. So you can kind of follow the teal boxes around the floor plan. We have a neighborhood of 6, we have a neighborhood of 3, we have a neighborhood of 6. And that keeps repeating both floors in both schools. You will notice that at pretty much where you see the words lower school and upper school, there's a tan place, thank you, that angles out. There is a stair here that connects the 2 floors. But it is called a community or learning stair. And what this is by expanding the width of the stair and then making the tread and risers bigger in one location, we can now actually gather the communities together in this spot and we can reinforce this idea of community. So these are sized to be able to take a neighborhood of 6 and be able to put them on, think of it as like stadium seating and present, there's a presentation wall right there so they can do, performances, or they can do presentations or whatever it is that they need to do to reinforce those levels of community. And this is just showing that the technical drawings have advanced. And so in order to get to concept design, we typically have floor plans, site plans, exterior elevations. That's what these are. For those that aren't familiar with technical drawings, an elevation is if you look at a building and you flatten it. And what you see on each elevation, so these are the 4 major elevations, and we've noted where, the upper primary, the lower primary, the shared spaces, and as we kind of rotate around the building, kind of what you're looking at to orient you. The next slide are building sections. So again, this is the level of detail we get to in concept to make sure that we have everything identified in the cost estimate, and that we are confident that the building is going to serve the needs of the school. From classrooms to gymnasiums to all the different spaces that are needed. And this is our latest imagery. So we have what you're seeing here on the screen is the upper primary entrance. So this is the experience if you were at the parent drop-off for the upper primary school, what you would see at the school. So that is the main entrance for the primary school. Where you see Scarborough Primary, that is the administration. The smaller volume next to it, the art, and then we start the 2-story classroom wing. On the next slide is the lower primary entrance. So be cognizant of differentiating these entrances through the use of color, but also through the use of scale. So we have lowered the entrance and we have changed the way that we apply color. So definitely giving it a different feel, but it ties into the overall as well. And so this would be if you were at the parent drop-off for the lower primaries. I believe everyone has seen this, the middle school scope of work. Nothing has changed in regards to this. We incorporated it just to reiterate what is included. So there are some building renovations and site modifications to essentially address the overcrowd. Once we take 6th grade out, those programs that don't in the school, doing renovations to accommodate those. You can go to the next slide.
So maybe this is a question for Todd. I don't mean to get off track here, but at the middle school, you mentioned those are really limited improvements, limited renovations. So are they, and it's a pretty old school, right? So can you just speak to the type of renovations that might be needed in the future here? I mean, is it something that's going to come up? I know we're spending a lot of time talking about the primary school solution, but this is probably the next piece of work. I mean,
It could be. I think the extent of the renovations here are that there are science labs that are not fully utilized in the way they could be. So the interior renovations are basically breaking those spaces up and creating additional spaces that will be removed when those 6th grade portable classrooms are gone. And then revising a few spaces in the wing towards the gym, those 3 spaces up there, to account for some other programmatic needs in the building. So.
Yeah, if you remember, Dawn, when we talked, probably in the very beginning, that we have teachers in the middle school that are on cart systems, meaning they pick up their classrooms and put them on a cart and travel. So the renovations of the science labs that are underutilized or not used to their full potential will allow those teachers to have actual classroom space. And so that we would eliminate that teacher on a cart that we experience that we have.
thanks.
There'll probably be some mechanical improvements as well as we go along, which we do virtually every summer. If you walk through the middle school right now, you will see that ongoing. So,
But no antique boilers there.
they're getting there.
Yeah.
Okay. One here.
So then we were asked to put in the project impact. I'll turn this back over to Dana and the school district.
Yeah, I think we've seen this graph before, but I think it talks a little bit about, you know, the enrollment in the enrollment study that was recently done. I think and I talked a lot about the historical accuracy of the enrollment studies. You know, with everything we see, I mean, in Scarborough, we've never trended on the lower side of the projections. I think it's ever gone that way if you look at the historic data. But the green line is what's anticipated. And we talked about sort of the two school solution, the solution that's being proposed, but then, a broken up solution, and the yellow line represents the capacity deficit. So if you look at the distance between the yellow line and the green line, that would be the capacity deficit every year, with the four school approach. And of course, that doesn't consider cost either, right? So I think what this sort of indicates is that, we have the blue line at the top would indicate the capacity that would be available once the unified school is online and the changes at the middle school are adjusted, have been made. So again, there's capacity there. I think it indicates that it's not an excessive amount of capacity. I think it's the right amount of capacity, given the projected lifespan of the asset. So the dotted line represents sort of the different. One of them is the best fit, and then the other one is the COVID best fit plus COVID model, which is, I think the dark green line is what we think is most likely.
And what's the significance of the blue line meeting the yellow line, or the yellow line meeting the blue line?
Yeah, so
Is that a
the
good
yellow
place
line,
to-
if you did the four school approach, right? So you have to, you build, once you build a school, you build a new school, then you have to renovate a school, and then when you renovate a school, theoretically, you get-
School approaches.
I see.
Yeah, so in 2033, if you had four schools, you would reach the capacity you would get with the new unified school in 2027. It would take you until 2033 to get there.
Okay, but why such a big leap in that last segment then? If you're doing it bit by bit, wouldn't they be closer along the way? And why are we jumping all of a sudden at the end?
Because that would be the time in which the fourth school would be added in and on board, right?
Finally
Because in the
closing out.
process, we're relocating a school to the new school while we renovate that. Then we move those kids back to their school, we relocate another school. So you don't realize that full capacity until the end of the fourth school.
that's when you're full. Full capacity is online.
Yep.
And do you mind if I just say, I'm jumping really quick?
Sure.
We, today, the finance subcommittee met, and we had a really robust discussion around what if this doesn't pass? What happens? And trying to really put a dollar figure on a fail referendum. And really, a good point that was made by one of our committee members is that when you do that, when you set up a portable, for lack of a better word, a portable city to accomplish what we would need, because just because we vote no on the referendum doesn't mean those kids stop coming here. So we still have to have some place to put them. So no does not equal $0. No equals a lot of short-term spending to meet the needs until we come up with a permanent solution. And that, what I'll say, like a portable school system, essentially is making a fourth school. So if the vote is no to put this to referendum, that is something that we would essentially be realizing is this fourth school option, but with portables.
And you still have to spend money to, so it's really, it becomes a cumulative impact over much more so than what's proposed with the unified school option. Because every year that goes by, you're buying the inflationary costs, for that full year. You're buying all of the temporary assets that will ultimately have to be written off. They would not be likely realize their full lifespan. So at the end of the solution, you would have to write off all those assets. And then you still have to build, permanent infrastructure to alleviate the pressure.
And I think you've said at one point in time, the cost of just one portable, or maybe it was you, Todd. Like, it was a big.
Yeah,
number.
I just did a revised estimate with our provider. And then I included all the infrastructural costs that have to go into those things. Such as sprinkler systems and PA systems and security and all the other various things. I have a lovely list on my desk, but we paid about $180,000 for a 2-classroom module the last time we bought them in 2020 and 2021. And now the price has doubled, the $350. And all the affiliated costs have doubled, so we're at about $800,000 for 2 classrooms. And there's no spot for them, so we'd be putting them in parking lots.
Well, and I think the point there is, you can't just put 2 classrooms in a parking lot. You need to have an office space. You need to have a place for them to eat lunch. You need to have gym spaces. You need to have special services spaces. You need to have a place for them to go to art and music. So when we start talking about, building these in a parking lot somewhere or a piece of land that we might own or be able to repurpose, we're not just talking about, oh, well, we'll need 3 classrooms. So let's buy the portables for 3 classrooms. You need everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, and the staff to operate it.
The staff.
Right, and that goes to what the business case illustrates, there's the 4th school option. You're taking your year in and year out personnel costs and increasing them by 1.5 to 2 million per year at the very least.
And you're needing to redistrict all of the students. And I'm sure there'll be some very happy parents to learn that their children can go to school in a portable that is standalone and not part of the larger, more permanent community.
There's no question, the lack of a plan B is a problem. There's no question about that. No dispute.
Well-
I wouldn't characterize it as a lack of
No,
a plan
no.
B. I think what you're hearing is the plan B. It is,
Not a good plan.
It's not an I would suggest it's not an acceptable plan B to probably our community. It's not, I would say, to our staff or to us. And hopefully it's not an acceptable to you either, quite frankly. Because that's not why anybody moves to Scarborough. It's not what they hope and dream for their kids when they attend school, is to have that experience, right? And so this is plan B.
So I walked the road with you the whole way.
Mhm.
So I'm pretty familiar with the issues, so.
Yeah.
Don't need a lot more instruction, on the challenges we have, no
Mhm.
question.
Yep.
No question about that.
The other thing I'll mention about this chart, I think it's important, and I failed to mention it, is there's a red line at the bottom that you can't see very well. That dashed red line is the capacity of the current primary schools, right? So just a little over, was approximately 500 students. We're well over that now. And so you can see the white area, that's all, capacity deficit. And you can say, well, we'll add in the portables. Well, it gets you a little bit further, but it doesn't close that gap nearly enough. So it's just, it's for context.
So we talked a lot about capacity. Any comments about educational impacts?
I mean, all of the slides that we presented about the educational impact of the consolidated school, of the unified school option, having all of our educators as well as our learners on the same campus. Operational efficiencies, I've said this multiple times, it's rare in this business where the most fiscally responsible option is also what's best for kids and what's best for the community and what's best for our staff. And this is a really good illustration of that. And the design elements that Lisa's just gone through and the design of this building is really for our teachers and our staff and our kids, a pretty ideal learning environment and in multiple ways. And in the short term and long term is something that this community can afford, that won't have a huge significant tax impact, I think, overall, short term and long term, as I think we've been able to demonstrate in multiple models. And frankly, in the long term is a need that has been real in this town for at least 10 years. and is long overdue, and feeling that sense of urgency, that urgency should have been there 10 or 11 years ago, frankly.
Or move to the next one. So we're going to cost update. And so earlier I was saying those that have been following along with the costs, so we're gonna see an increase, and that increase is the stormwater moving on site. So that, what we're showing here is kind of the evolution from the 710 estimate, which is the last, or sorry, this estimate that we're presenting right now, to the difference from the 615 estimate, which is the last one we presented. You see nothing changes at the middle school reno. What changes is at the new primary school. And that's about $3.2 million total project cost due to the stormwater being treated on site one.
But again, eliminates the need for the purchase of site two.
Correct. Thank you.
And also eliminates the need for shared costs on an ongoing basis, right? Because
Yeah, that's a great point, Diane. I think that's a good point of clarification. So the way that we're gonna work stormwater, because that 3.8 acre parcel was too large for we didn't need the total capacity there. So when you look at, how we were gonna potentially look at saying, okay, well, we don't need the whole thing, but we still want to discharge our stormwater to that parcel. We were talking about sort of almost like a fee-based structure. So we would pay, essentially a fee to whoever owned the parcel to say, okay, we're going to discharge our water. You handle the maintenance of the stormwater discharge, stormwater structure. And it just becomes, almost like an association fee.
So is it really the stormwater question that was the reason why we said we needed a minimum of 25 acres? And now we're actually going to be able to do it with 23 acres?
I think it's, I think that's, I would say no. It's, we have, I think, a compressed layout on the current site. And I don't think we're, I think it's adequate, it's workable.
Did we have to reduce anything in terms of the footprint because of this last wrinkle?
No,
No, our geotech analysis allowed us to be even more efficient with the site. So we couldn't really know how efficient we could be until we had that information, which is why it just changed, because we have that information.
yeah, there are so many factors that play into, you always set out to be as efficient as you can with the property that you have and minimize it. So you're minimizing the amount of land that you have to consume and to purchase. But until you get the geotechnical information, until you get the parcel, sort of layout and the shape it's pretty difficult to say, well, I need, a minimum of a certain amount. So I feel like we're where we need to be. I think it works well. Yeah. I have to step out here if I get another phone call.
So the next slide just shows the evolution of the estimates that have been presented. You can see kind of the first estimate and kind of the due diligence we did to review that and make sure that everything was efficient as possible, as well as the scope. And then you see the add for the 710 for the stormwater, again, bringing us to the 144, 145.02 number. That's really all this slide shows. You can go to the next one. So this, there is a summary of how we arrive at those costs. And I apologize, this is not as clear as we'd like it to be. But what it does is it shows there's different categories. When we talk about construction costs, there's a number. Then when we talk about soft costs, that is the plus or minus 25%. And so what this shows you is B, C are those soft costs. So you have administrative costs and reserves, fees and services. And so those are all the categories, numbers and budget line items that total the soft costs, which is that soft cost number. So just so folks know where those numbers.
I'll be back.
So I've seen a figure of 25 to 30% in terms of, the estimated increase for construction costs that are being used. Is that over the term of the entire project, or is that something that's an annual line, it has to be adjusted
So
annually?
you're saying you mean the 25 plus 25%?
Yeah.
So that is the soft costs.
Okay,
So when we have the construction, which is A,
right,
and then we talk about soft costs, we just have historic data that tells us roughly a school will have about 25%
I see.
additional costs to make that up. And this comes in pretty close. We actually do it line by line and it comes in at 25.5%.
and these have to do with administrative and the
Correct.
work to do to support the construction.
Exactly.
But the 25 or 30% that I was talking about, at least I see these are construction estimates in terms of materials and, you know, cost increases for construction over a period of time. So I didn't know if those were in addition to these
So
or,
in in the cost estimate for construction, we take into account what it would take us from today's dollars to when the construction.
Yeah.
happened. There's a percentage that's covered. in
okay.
there.
But separate and distinct with this.
You don't add another 25.
Okay, it's included.
It's incorporated into this.
An A.
An A, yes.
How does this include PP&E, furniture, fixtures?
So it does. So that would be under movable equipment, which would be 3. So that there's a separate line, roughly it's 4% for equipment, 4% for technology, because there's a big technology component to schools.
So everything but the land
Everything but the land and
and the
offsite.
road.
Offsite costs.
Yeah,
That's why that says 0 on land under there. Now that you've made us all dizzy.
Sorry.
This here.
Okay.
The costs that are not included in that, so those costs are the building, construction and design and the site building, construction and design. It is not offsite cost and it is not procurement. So site procurement, offsite costs, those are currently, as we all know around this table, actively being worked out with the school and the town. And then forthcoming after that will be the impact to the taxpayers coming from the town, and those are all anticipated to be completed by August 16th. So just to make it clear, so when people see these numbers, what is not included. Okay.
Go to John. You want me to pull up the,
Yeah. Do you have a link to it or?
yes.
Okay. So I've been working with the finance committee for probably a couple of months. And I've been doing modeling for longer than that, with other projects for the town, but really just to try to help get our arms around how this will impact the tax rate. And so there's kind of 2 components there. One is how much will it cost? And you just saw it, 148 plus or minus million plus some other things.
140.
144, sorry. We're still modeling 140. Yeah. That's a pretty, it's a well-known number. We can say, okay, we're gonna have to issue debt over 3 or 4 years and given an interest rate and spread out over 20 or 30 years, this is how much it will cost. What that doesn't answer is, how's that going to impact my taxes? Because how it's going to impact your taxes is a much more complex question, because there's a lot of things going on that impact your taxes. For example, we've been carrying debt for a number of years, roughly around 13% of our budget's been due to debt. Well, that debt is being paid off. And so that creates some capacity to take on new debt. We're growing. The past couple of years, we're growing a little faster than we have historically. And that also brings in some new tax revenue that can help support projects like this. So there's also legislative changes that happen, where reimbursement for things like homestead exemption, might go up or down based on changes that the legislature makes. Or funding for schools or general purpose aid. There's a tweak that looks like it's coming through now where they might start funding minimum receivers at 55% of your special education costs as opposed to 50%. Those little changes impact where we have room to do or not do things. So we've tried to incorporate the ones that we know about. And it's fairly granular right now. It's not perfect, but it gives us an indication of where we might have capacity and how this might create pressure on the tax rate. So we developed a model. It's currently being peer reviewed, actually. And Tom or John could probably give a better update on that, but I think there's a couple of outside entities that are helping the DIMS test, both the functionality, how things are flowing, and then the assumptions that are being fed into it. And we've received some preliminary feedback that I think is very helpful. And we'll drive the ultimate results. Interest rates are a little bit of a wild card right now. We worked with our financial advisor a couple of months ago. We're getting ready to go sell bonds. So we're going to have a much better feel, I think, in the coming month about where exactly that, the interest rates are going to come in and what kind of terms we might have available to us. And then, so there's an awful lot of numbers that are going into this. Most of them won't mean anything to anybody.
This one?
Yes, so we're trying to boil it down to, okay, well, what is somebody going to care about? And even this page has a lot of numbers, but the chart on the left is your projected taxes. So if you have a $400,000 home or property, and you can change the input there, it shows you year by year what your tax bill will be. So if you hover over, for example, 2024, which is the budget that we just passed, if you have a $400,000 home, it looks like your tax bill is going to be about $6,400. If you jump ahead 3 or 4 years, and this is assuming everything that we know about in our capital plan and other things going on in the environment, it looks like your taxes would be around $7,100. They don't typically go down. And I don't think there's
no increase there.
No, that's the
start.
Yes, so the 4.43% is the change from the prior year, from 2026.
But
And-
not because of the school.
Well, it's because of the school and everything else
Everything else
that
you're
is going
doing,
on.
yeah.
Yeah, that is where it looks like it will come in based on all the factors that are going into the model. And I guess take all of this with a grain of salt. This is very much in draft form still, but order of magnitude is not going to be that far off. So if you scroll down a little bit, it creates it shows you some totals, and it actually shows you some older projects. We created Wentworth 2014. We're still paying for that. Looks like over the next 30 years, about $2,200 for this taxpayer will go to Wentworth. And you compare that to the primary school, which is down at the bottom, the $149 million school. About $15,000 will be spent for this taxpayer over the next 30 years. That's roughly 5% of the taxes that you expect to collect on that property. Just to give you kind of a range.
So I just want to make sure, I want to repeat what you just said. So over 30 years, the taxpayer that owns a $400,000 valued home would pay $15,504 in taxes for the school over 30 years.
Yeah. $500, $600 a year.
One thing I'd like to point out, though, is that $400,000 home is not $400,000 each year as you go forward. That's
Correct.
the value of that home is different.
But
But-
we contemplate that.
you
Yeah,
adjusted
so the value of that home goes up over 30 years. The assessed value goes up every 5 years because we plan to do a revaluation every 5 years. And we expect a pretty big bump in the value when we do our next revaluation in 2025.
Yep.
And then we're contemplating that it will get back down to historical norms after that.
But your chart here shows, though, that the 5% of that increase is related to the primary school.
5% of the taxes collected
Taxes collected.
would be related to.
Not the tax bill, taxes collected.
So 5% of the taxes collected in the town of Scarborough. goes-
That's
goes to the
exactly
primary
how
school.
it's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd probably say it 4 to 6%, or I put a range around it, but I think that's roughly about what it would be.
So just let me ask this, is that the largest percentage of the pie? Or what would be the largest percentage of the pie?
Scroll up a little.
Right here.
It would be.
Well, the biggest piece of the pie is your operating expenses, right?
Right.
Your wages, your salaries,
Right.
but
Which are also school related.
some of them,
The
Yeah,
majority of our expenses do go to.
good amount of them. But like order of magnitude, if you go up a little more for the pie chart, So you see the big blue is your operating expenses less revenue. The red 7% is not the school. That's what we spend to take care on regular debt service. That's
Right.
what we spend on roads and
Of everything we need to buy.
computers and other
Right,
things. Yeah, so the debt that we're paying on those other things is bigger than the school. The
Yeah.
school is
The schools.
5.1%.
So these are your other expenses that the town has that are unrelated to the school.
I understand.
Yeah.
But think of that for a moment, 7% of our total budget goes to paying for debt for everything, fire engines, everything, equipment that we buy. We bond a lot of things. In our debt, our annual debt, annual interest is roughly equal. The amount of dollars we spend on interest is roughly equal to our total budget. It's comparable.
Over time, because you're paying interest every year, it adds up, but you're also spreading the cost of those projects amongst the people who are using them.
But
in the future.
to me, that, if the two numbers, it's a smaller number than the other one, but to me, I might I might interpret that differently.
A lot of people do. Where I hone in on here is that we've been spending 13% of our operating budget on debt.
Yep.
On debt service. We've been doing that for quite some time. It's actually a little less than that now. Some of that's not spent on debt. This year we're able to fund capital with cash. But just adding up the 7% and the 5.1%, that's 12, and you got a couple other slivers there for the community center and the library. You're not that far off of the 13% target, looking ahead 30 years.
So that would hold steady, those current breakdowns.
We're not that, there's a couple of years in the next few years, we're gonna certainly exceed that, but over the long run, we're still playing in that same ballpark.
Right, so for over the 30 years that the school would be bonded for, you would still ostensibly meet your target of the no more than 13%.
Within a reasonable range, yeah. And Tom, I don't know if you wanted to update anything from.
Yeah, I mean, this, John, to his credit, has developed this and did this well over a year ago for some of the other big capital projects we're talking about, and it's been perfected and worked on, and I think perfected ever since. Many of my staff have had lots of involvement in terms of testing and sensitivity analysis of the different assumptions, and that's not to say they're perfect, and we're open for further input from anyone who has an opinion in that regard. But we also do recognize that we do need some independent verification. So we're using Barry Dunn and kind of all the resources that come to bear with that consulting organization to do a pretty detailed analysis, certainly looking at the assumptions. I think part of that will be indicating which of them are kind of the most sensitive and which one should we be most concerned about in terms of if we get it wrong, what are the impacts? We do have some very kind of preliminary input, and I expect some further, more detailed input. I think certainly in time for the council to take into account as part of their consideration in the next month or so. And then we've also had conversations with GP God. They too are expecting to do some work looking at the assumptions, and we think the more the merrier at this point. Independent voices and eyes looking at this and giving us input. Certainly share what those results are and make adjustments accordingly. Just we learned tonight that a major assumption needs to be updated with expected cost of the project. And as John mentioned, we'll know in the next couple of weeks whether that interest rate calculations and assumptions are accurate. So this is an organic model, if you will, that will improve as the information becomes better.
John, can you just clarify, because I know people often ask about the TIF benefit, and I know we're still exploring whether or not the TIF funds could be used to pay for a school, but does this model contemplate that, or is that outside of this model? So this is kind of showing, kind of excluding that, which would actually make the number look a little bit different in terms of on the better side.
It attempts to contemplate that, and it does it pretty well for general purpose aid. And I actually have this coming out of minimum receivership. So the benefit isn't that huge of sheltering, but you're getting the benefit of minimum receivership. yes, it's factored in. It's an estimate. There's a lot of factors that go into the shelter benefit. And they happen over a long period of time. So when we capture money in a TIF district today, the benefit's gonna happen over the next 7 years. And it's kind of like a little bit, it trickles in over that period of time. So a lot of people, when they look at this, they're gonna be looking at the next 5 years, because honestly, you go out too much further and the world could change by then.
Yeah.
So shelter benefit's not gonna play a big role in what happens in the next 5 years.
John, do we have an idea of when it is likely that we may go back to minimum receivership status?
Well, so like the change I talked about going from 50 to 55% of your special education costs from 2 years ago. That raises the bar on minimum receivers. So you're going to get at least that amount for aid from the state. That kicks in. We might be minimum receivers in a year or two.
I'm gonna ask you a lot of questions, or have another question. So I think for the public, especially knowing what happened with some of the other schools where, in other communities, they were seeing these huge investments in their mill rate as a result of a new school that wasn't as much as this. Can you explain again? You kind of talked about it a little bit, but I'm hoping you can explain a little bit more about the uniqueness of Scarborough, where we are, where our debt is that's making room for this, just to kind of help people understand how, a 4 to 5% mill rate increase is actually possible, and it may not be 20% like Cape Elizabeth saw.
Yeah, so Cape Elizabeth's number was 25%, I think, but it was a very crude estimate. So what they did was they assumed that they're going to issue all of the debt for the school right now, and that the tax base that they have right now is going to cover all of that debt. That's just not reality. If we go forward with this, we're going to probably issue debt next year associated with the school, and then for 4 years or 3 years after that. So that is spreading out the initial burden. So it's not that initial shock anyways. It's not 25%. That's why we're in the 4 to 5% range. I don't think Cape Elizabeth has as much debt as we do. So we've been carrying 13% of our operating budget for debt service for a long time. And you can view that in different ways. It does create interest costs, but it also gives us some capacity to handle projects like this without negatively impacting the tax rate. That's why a big part of the reason why you use debt is to spread that burden out over time.
Elizabeth doesn't have a diverse tax base at all.
And they're not growing as fast as we are. So all these things kind of.
In fact, they anticipate possible decline in population, slight decline.
Yeah, it's a totally different environment.
And there, John talked to us earlier today. We spoke about the how we would take debt out, right? So instead of, to your earlier point, instead of taking 150 million out right now for the project, you take it out in chunks, which actually is helpful when you're looking at the burden to the taxpayer.
Yeah, and you have options. The town and bond council will, or the financial advisor will figure this stuff out. But when you issue debt, you can pick your term, you can negotiate interest rates, and sometimes you can defer interest. Depending on the situation you find yourself in when you have to issue it, there's tools at our disposal to help mitigate the impact. And we haven't gotten into contemplating those tools with this. We just assume that we're going to issue it over 30 years at 4%.
So can I ask a question of I think probably the finance committee, but maybe building steering in general, like, have you guys had discussion around how to answer the $1 million question? Like, have you got, like, we need the tools and the language to be able to talk about this, because we know that the community is going to want to know what their tax impact is going to be.
I will say that the finance committee reached out to the communication committee to start draft language, which the communication committee has started. But essentially they will pass it back to the town, because the town will ultimately refine that.
Yeah, I think the finance committee is working through the model. The model is being worked with a couple different firms just for, verifying that, our assumptions are correct. Things like interest rates are are reasonable, that, you know, we sort of cross-check and that when we do provide that estimate, you know, and John has done an outstanding job with the model, but you know, I know there's been some questions around, hey, you know, is this, you know, these are inputs, is the model, you know, work the way it's supposed to, and I think once we have that, we'll be able to say, okay, here's the impact, and have a couple different expert reviews on, you know, hey, we've got the right assumptions, we have the right inputs, and the model is producing a number that's realistic, but I think the early view is that this model does a really good job at you know, showing that. So.
I think it's worth highlighting, you know, what you said, Dana, how, you know, we are so lucky as a town to have Counselor Pucci to do something this sophisticated. Because I know when Tom reached out to other towns, I think, to ask how they're kind of calculating, it's nowhere near this sophisticated. So I think what we will be able to say to the public will be with such a higher degree of confidence about what impact is. Again, it's all based on assumptions. So again, as Counselor Pucci mentioned, 5 years, pretty confident. What happens after that, we're going to have to reevaluate. If another COVID happens, heaven forbid, like,
Right.
that creates an unpredictable, so hopefully not something like that happens. But again, I just want to thank Counselor Pucci for all of his work on this. And I hope the taxpayers will feel very confident in whatever the number is that we provide through the communications is something that we can fully proudly stand behind as what that likely impact will be.
And I think you know, the people have been waiting for this answer, right? What's the tax impact going to be? How much is it going to cost? Maybe it's felt like that's taken longer to produce than it should, but I will say that the reason for that is that there's a great deal of scrutiny and caution that goes into making sure that what we're putting out is good information. So again, I echo the comments and certainly appreciate John, your work, Counselor Pucci, Counselor Hamel, everybody. It's been a team effort. So
Well, I think to your point, it's like not lost on anybody that this is a big investment. It's a huge investment. It's a big number. And so we need to be as precise as we can. And I think we're so lucky again to have Counselor Pucci to kind of get us to this point, and then getting some of those peer reviews to come in and help take it even to that, you know, next level. I think it's just gonna, again, hopefully give everybody in the public confidence when we come out with whatever the number is, that that's something that they can, you know, hold pretty close.
So we've got about 20 minutes left, and what I would like to do is open this up for questions and comments from counselors, from for us, for Lisa, for Dana. August 16th is right around the corner. We know you have a big decision. That's when you will decide if this is going to referendum. And really what we're looking for is any concerns or questions you have that we can answer as you contemplate this and you get to August 16th. So I would love to open it up to you. Is your hand raised, Nick?
It is. Just real quick, the building design. Is that are you able to build upward if you needed to in the future?
I'm sorry.
The building design, are you able to build upward if you needed to in the future?
The committee, right now, it's not designed to do that, and the reason being is there was discussion around a 2-story versus 3-story, and the committee determined that it was best to go with a 2-story for the kiddos of this age.
Will it be designed to accept the 3rd floor if their need ever arose?
We can look at, currently, no, but we can look at what that would take to adjust that. I'm currently looking to go out.
I understand, because this has been part of the discussion, why we can't renew schools we have today is we can't build up.
So we accommodated out instead of up.
Yeah, and can you just clarify, because I think it's 24 classrooms, which is a whole nother primary school.
It's four more schools, 4 more primary schools on the outside.
4 more
Mhm.
And I will
compared to
say,
today.
so there's a few factors that go into that. One is foundation design. So the foundation design right now is, you know, by going with 2 stories, you get some efficiency out of that. We do have to do soil improvements in order to bear the load of the building. It's like every place in Scarborough, it's sand and clay. So by going to 2 stories, we make that foundation design efficient and affordable, but still achieve a good result. And then by adding those classroom wings in the future, also keeping those to 2-story, you maintain that same efficiency. If you were to add much more than that, I think now you're starting to get into what's a really, really big school. And also you start to have additional needs for things like parking, stormwater infrastructure, all your utilities start to go up. So, you know, you, like Lisa said, you have 24 additional classrooms that would be able to be accommodated. And so anyway,
Yeah, so I mean, the other way to look at it is if you were to put the infrastructure into the building to go up now, you're putting a lot more money into the building for a maybe needed future addition. If we add on, so it's accommodated to add on to the sides of the building, we put a couple extra additional elements of structure in the wall to make those connections in the future. And we're not putting that money in now for a maybe need in the future, but we've accommodated and we're smart about where we're running things so that we can easily add on to the sides.
it's much more from a constructability perspective is less impactful, it's lower cost. It's, you know, zero disturbance to the surrounding classroom. So you could do it during the school season if you need.
Correct.
So I think the point, Lisa, you made at one meeting was this school is designed for 1,130 students, but it could handle up to 1,230. So there's even excess capacity in the school before you have to build the addition.
Correct.
So to your question about can this handle additional capacity in the future? The answer is yes, it can handle 100 additional students plus 24 new classrooms, which
Yeah,
is
it's more than that, because I mean, if you look at the enrollment study, there's a certain number they give us at the highest and amount, and then the contingency factor, we add 5% to that, and that's our design number, and we put the design number at the middle range of the classrooms. If we're to maximize those classrooms from a loading standpoint and number of students to teacher ratio, that's where we get to 1230. So we've designed for the 1130, but it can handle up to, including the core spaces, 1230. So we have a couple layers of capacity contingency if that were to happen, but then we also accommodate areas for addition. So like the middle school right now, where those utilities are run really prevents us from adding on to that school without redoing all of that infrastructure. So as we think about all the underground improvements that we're doing, we're staying out of those areas. So in some ways, it's smart to put playgrounds there right now because nothing else will be run in those locations.
So if you had to expand out, what happens with the play areas
So they would be relocated on the site.
in the back edge where the bigger fields are?
They can either go to the back edge, they can go in between the additions, there'll still be the lower portion, there'll still be some room there. I mean, we can look at, there can be room at the back of the cafeteria. We've left some areas, so one of the things we don't note it as a future addition, but we're going to preserve the area at the back of the cafeteria to be able to, if we need to add on back there, but also be able to put play area there in the future.
And then building orientation on the site, I know that always gets tricky, but I believe the planning board probably at some point or another would want to know how this interfaces with what the Downs is projecting to build out. As far as where your parking fields are located and things like that. Is this design able to be rotated to some degree to accommodate potential other development on the property?
The different folks from the town have been involved in looking at this. They're aware of how we've oriented the building, and it's also driven, it's the ideal orientation with the front facing south from a snow melt standpoint, but also for the best solar orientation for the classroom place.
Do you have another building design? Just out of curiosity.
This is the building design that we've moved forward with for concept design. I mean, we can come
You
up with a
guys-
million.
I'm asking as
different-
a committee, did you actually?
We looked at several different organizational patterns, and this was the one that we moved forward with.
Yeah, and again, one thing that I'll just sort of put out there as a, just for information is, you know, yeah, this is starting to congeal now, but the purpose of this is really for quantity estimating, right? So we're trying to get an idea of how much stuff do we have to buy and what's the shape of it, and that's the way that we are able to estimate the cost. So we know square footages, we know how many, square feet of windows do we have? How many square feet of parking lot, all of those things. Can it change between now and the final design? I can guarantee you it likely will change. And there'll be adjustments and inputs along the way. So this is by no means the final design. But from a quantity perspective, once we sort of, say, okay, yeah, this is something like this is what we're gonna have, and we're sort of married to like, this is our budget, we're gonna have to work within it, so.
So assuming this passes, this particular plan, this particular model, the whole thing. There's no need to talk about the dreaded plan B, a dreaded plan B. What do you have an idea of what what the what the costs will be, going forward? In other words, so are you, say you overbuilt and or we in the past have used a thing called value engineering. When we built Wentworth, we do that. It's a common practice for large construction projects, value engineering. What is the estimate of the cost that we would be able to recover in the application of value engineering principles?
I think that if I was able to answer that question right now, I probably would not be sitting in this room.
I know it's not a popular topic, so I know how you feel.
There's an opportunity, there's always opportunity to make trade-offs. You can look at mechanical systems and you say, okay, well, maybe we don't want to do geothermal, right? We're just gonna be, brown energy, and we're gonna, make the maximum carbon we can, and we're just gonna burn oil and, hey, but that would cost less.
Well, there's no question we're going first cabin here, okay? So we planned for a model that has virtually everything that people could possibly imagine and desire, okay? So this is a, best in category, best in class plan. So, but we have used that methodology. Tom's familiar with it. We talked about it when the library was going through their process. So I think, in this world, if we're really going for the best possible solution, it seems only reasonable to me we'd be able to estimate, or at least give a range for what we think we might be able to recoup in terms of looking for efficiencies.
So I'll speak a little bit to that. This is based on need. It's not based on, we want all these different things. It's based on the needs of the programs that are going into the school, and it's designed for those needs, and really no more. We didn't increase size of gymnasiums so that they could be high school size and competitive. These are designed for this age of kiddo, for the programs that are needed. In regards to value engineering, it is such a difficult thing to address, because essentially you don't know what you need to value engineer until you're told how much you're over. And at that point, sometimes, depending on the threshold of that gap, the only way to solve it sometimes is to cut programs out of the building. We don't want to do that.
Well, I know we haven't done that at all, but I know when we did the public safety building, we they have as a plan, well, they didn't plan 2 gyms, but they planned 2 kitchens, and they decided to do 1 kitchen. There were other examples like that. Rocky was better.
So we don't have that in this school. We have 1 kitchen. It's a cooking kitchen, therefore it is bigger than the K2s right now, because those are warming kitchens.
I think though so 2 things. One is, this is not a gilded plan, but value engineering, I think we're not at that stage yet. So what's been put together right now is just sort of like, okay, these are the quantity estimates for what we think we need to have. Once the design is done and we put the project out to bid, and we get numbers back, say even if we're not way over, even if we're within budget, a lot of times, and I do this for a living, contractors will say, hey, you guys asked for this, but I can give you the same product for 20% less. And so do you want to do that? And we look at the product and we say, yeah, they're exactly comparable. So yeah, go ahead, we'll take that. So that's the stage at which we would do the value engineering.
Right.
And absolutely, that is a best practice, and something that we would absolutely do.
If we're trying to figure out a number though, and what we could take out, it's really tough to determine, but it's a great point that we will continue to look for efficiencies. The other thing to keep in mind is we have contingencies built into this. So if we go out to bid and right now, prices are, all over the place and we estimate based on what we're seeing those escalations. If the economy levels out or anything else, we could potentially see this come in below budget, right on budget, and we have a bid contingency in there that essentially could be savings in the project overall. So there's different areas that could ultimately reduce the cost of the building. But they're really hard to determine at this point.
So my only suggestion is we need to be open to concepts like this. So when the question gets asked and we say, no, we can't possibly do that, or we can't do that now. I would just suggest that, if we're trying to build support for this, we'd say we'll do whatever we can to be efficient in the process. So that would be
Absolutely.
my friendly suggestion.
Yeah, and I would say too, there's been a lot of work done with Diane and Jeff and Lisa to address is exactly what you're saying, right? So like going through and developing a workbook and creating actual layouts for the space that's needed. So not the nice to have, not the let's put every, let's make the gilded halls down there. That's not what's happened. They've been really, really effectively looking at what are our actual needs versus what is the nice to have.
And that was included in the business case, so and it was many pages. So
Mhm.
the amount of detail and fine tuning you guys went through is there for the public to see, to show that there's no fluff. It's all it's all based on state requirements, best practice, like.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I know you've done it in areas you made the case quite well, I think, in terms of the, how the increase in special needs, meeting emotional needs is a different animal, that it's something, it takes a different effort to address and to make sure that you're equipped to provide the services that are required there. So I mean, I understand that, it's a changing world and it's getting harder and more expensive to provide educational services for broad population. I get that. So, but I would just say, when we're going through this process, it's gonna help us with the public and with the political side of this, try to encourage frank, free exchange of ideas and to keep an open mind, if possible.
So I do want to just clarify, like I heard you say a few minutes ago in your example, like you made a comparison to the public safety building had 2 kitchens and we have 2 gyms. And so that caused wonder for me as to perhaps you're questioning our need for 2 gyms. And I just want to make sure that we're really clarifying that those 2 gyms are both elementary sized gyms that are going to have a curtain that are going to be split. So 2 classes can happen at one time in each gym. And those were done on our space allocation workbook based on programming for the number of classes and the requirements that we have to offer physical education to our students. So
But
I just wanted to go on record of saying that though, because I
Let me
think you
respond
put
to
that out
Let me
there.
respond to that with the fact that as we speak, there's still a gap between what the state requirement is in terms of square footage per student and what we are proposing. And I don't know the exact numbers, but one's 140, and I think the one that we're pursuing is higher than that. It's still higher than that. So that's, and my apologies for picking on the gym, that was the only 2 things I can think of.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure anyone listening, doesn't walk away with that assumption.
But my point is that data point that I just mentioned, there's still a gap there, and then there will be questions about that.
I think one of the things to consider though, especially when you follow state requirements, is the middle school.
Yeah.
Oh,
Where
yeah.
that was the
Yeah,
state.
all of it, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where immediately we put
We went big
with the middle
with Wentworth.
school.
The middle
Yeah.
school.
The middle school was obsolete day 1.
And that was state
And
funded.
that's
And that
supposed to
was
be the
state-funded.
state minimum.
Yeah, I mean, we had to
It's a
put in those
minimum.
portables. How many years after it opened? 2 years, those portables had to be installed.
I think ultimately though, to Counselor Hamill's point, I think everybody in this room is committed when this goes out to bid,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
to,
Absolutely.
to look for the right things that could help to drive down costs
Yes.
ultimately.
I don't know about
And,
the
yeah.
rest of you, I'm a taxpayer.
Yeah,
so-
where we can save money, let's save money.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing everyone shaking their head that they agree with
I
that.
think just to clarify, my response was, can I tell you right now what it is? And I can't.
No, that's okay.
But
Mhm.
as we go forward, absolutely, every project throughout the process.
Yeah, I just-
We will do cost estimate checks, not when it goes out to bid, but every step along the way to make sure that we're on.
It will help our effort and we're
Yeah.
able to incline ourselves that way to those kinds of questions.
Yeah, Donna, I just want that. So at this stage of the process, the intent is to be overly conservative
Yep.
and to ask for more than you absolutely think you can need, because it's very difficult to get more money.
Absolutely.
And thank you for not mentioning me as the reason.
No.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there's anything left that we can answer, I've said this before, and I think it just bears repeating again, this is the overcrowding, the situations we've talked about this whole time and going throughout this is not just a 7 of us on the board's problem. This is all 14 of us at this table problem. And it doesn't matter how we got here. It doesn't matter what was done in the past. What matters is that we've got it in front of us right now, and what are we going to do about it? So if there's anything we can answer leading up to August, we're happy to do so. We're happy to meet again. Anything you need to ahead of your vote.
Is there anything additional to that point that we want to make sure for the August 16th meeting is provided? I know with the library, one of the things we asked for kind of towards the end was a pro forma operating budget, just to kind of better understand what the operating budget looks like. I know that was something that some counselors were interested in seeing. Is that something we need to see for August 16th, or what's the sentiment on that? Or you can think about it and then I can get it back to Shannon if that's something that we need. But again, if there's anything else you need for decision-making on the 16th, let me know so that I can partner with the school to make sure we're getting the right detailed information that we need to ultimately decide our votes on the 16th.
Jeff or Diane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of that's provided in the business case, the projection of operating school, the operating. estimates.
And again, I recognize the size of the capital investment here. But the real savings in this is the operational and personnel costs and having everyone on one campus. Long-term has massive savings as well as massive benefits for our learners. I can't emphasize that enough.
All right, well, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. We'll take just like a 2-minute break. Okay. Do you want me to do this slide there? Here, yeah, I'll do it, no worries. All right. Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, July 13th, 2023 Scarborough Board of Education Business Meeting. Diane, can we call the attendance, please? Sure.
Miss Gammon. Here. Mr. Kelleher,
Here.
Miss Leong,
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Here.
Mr. Mayorino.
Here.
Miss Tarpinian,
Here.
Miss Trapani Huff,
She's been excused.
Miss Ledger.
Here.
And Mr. Shumway.
He's been excused from the meeting. Perfect, thank you. Would everybody please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Perfect, thank you. Are there agenda item 4.0 or adjustments to the agenda? Are there any adjustments this evening?
No adjustments?
Correct. Agenda item 5.0 is public comment. Is there anybody wishing to make public comment this evening? Seeing none and seeing none online, I will close public comment. Agenda item 6.0 is the Scarborough High School Spain trip, April of 2024. So at this time, we'll invite Brianna Kelman, the high school Spanish teacher, up to the podium.
Hi, everybody. Brianna Kelman, Spanish teacher, department chair of world languages at the high school. I live at 220 Pine Point Road. Fun fact, I was listening to the end of your conversation. It was particularly interesting because my class was the first class to go into Scarborough Middle School. So I was sitting there thinking of how much has changed in the past couple of decades, but I digress. So I'm just here to share a little bit about a trip that I hope to lead in April of 2024. I just got back from a Spain-France trip this April, which got me talking about it with the kids and all excited about it. And they're like, when are you doing another one? So anyway, here I am. So this particular trip would be to Portugal and Spain. So it's a little different from just Spain, but it's open to language students. So it's different from some of the other trips that are led in our school. It's open to French and Spanish students. I would go to Lisbon, Évora, Algarve, Sintra, Sevilla, the Costa del Sol, my personal favorite, Gibraltar, Granada, Valencia, Barcelona, of course. So all the major destinations, avoiding some of the bigger cities like Madrid. Kids seem to like the smaller spots, so we've been kind of going to more smaller cities lately. Some of the stuff that we'll see, the Alhambra, of course, many fortresses, parks, monasteries, churches like the Sagrada Familia, museums. It's always fun to look at the architecture and the art, and of course the Boqueria, which is a place where the kids absolutely love to order food. It's like anything you could ever dream up to eat in a big market in Barcelona, and it's so fun to hear the students practice their language. So that's a personal favorite. It would be through EF Tours, which I've been traveling with since 2011. I've done many trips with them. I know you guys have other teachers that stand in front of you who also use them. So I figured I would just share my favorite thing about EF is that when things go wrong, they're really helpful. They have a huge network of people. You know, we had a flat tire once on a big bus in the middle of nowhere, like Dust Bunny kind of town in the middle of Spain. They pooled resources, got us dinner at this beautiful little hotel nearby, fixed the bus and sent us on their way, just as an example, because when we travel, especially with large groups, things can happen. So it's nice for me to know that there's an organization that's really, this is what they do. So they're good at problem solving. My personal favorite of why I'm doing this is so the kids can practice the language, of course, see all the places that I talk about day in and day out that I get so excited about. So it's always memorable for them. It's life-changing and it's a great experience. So that is what I hope to do in April vacation of 2024. As with the other trips that I have done, I usually go with Helen Van Nest, who is the French teacher. So we'll be opening that up to language students in the fall. Any questions? Well, I do smaller trips than some of the ones that you've probably heard about, like Max 24. The last group I took was only 18, so probably 3 to 4 chaperones. But hey, if you're interested, know where to find me.
We appear to have a good number of people interested in chaperoning here.
Yes,
So
I don't know why. Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's work, but it's very fun.
it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for coming and presenting.
Thanks for your time. I know you guys have a packed agenda, so thanks for getting me in. Take care.
All right. All right, agenda item 7.0 is the new school building project update. So for this, I'll invite Lisa from Harriman up here.
I'm happy to be a chaperone too, if you're looking for any. So I'm here to give an update. Many of you just received this very similar update, but we wanted to make sure that we provided an update on the school project for all those who might be listening in. So this is very similar to the workshop that just occurred, but want to make sure everyone's on the same page about the school building project. So this is the K-8 strategic solution. Tonight, we're going to go over what the solution is, the project impact, that's both educational and cost, the schedule, and then we'll talk about the vote that the building committee just took this week in regards to this project, and essentially why we are coming forward tonight. With us, we have the building committee chair, Dana, as well as our site civil designer, Goral Palmer. We have Al Palmer from Goral Palmer here as well. So please feel free to chime in with any additional information. And we also have Todd, building facilities. And we have John also on the building committee. I just want to give kudos to all those who are still here. So first up is the solution. So if we go to the next slide. So the issue right now is the overcrowding. And I won't even say right now, historically has been the overcrowding in the schools in Scarborough. This project looks to address that from K-12. So what it does is it looks at taking the 6th grade out of the middle school, removing the portables, doing minor renovations to the middle school. And that is to make sure that once the 6th grade moves out, that we have every program in a program space. Right now, there are 4 programs that are on carts, which means they travel to whatever space they can find within the school to give their programming. So what happens to the 6th graders? The 6th graders will move to Wentworth. In order, right now, the Wentworth is designed for 3 grade levels, so it will become 4 through 6. And the 3rd grade will move to a new primary school, which will also serve the K-2 schools right now. So we will have one new unified K-3 primary school and renovations happening to the middle school in order to alleviate the overcrowding now and what is projected in the future. Next slide. So where we're at in the process right now is there are conversations going on around site procurement. The site is located in Scarborough Downs. You can see the red block in the middle there is the building footprint, along with the drives and parent drop-off and bus drop-off. So pretty much between Road B and Road A is the school building site, and it's being highlighted with the cursor right now. There are ongoing conversations with the school and the town regarding site procurement as well as off-site improvements. So tonight's conversation is really about the building design and construction, as well as the site design and construction within that area that we see right now. Next slide. This is the site plan. So the building is set up to be a school within a school, and we'll explain that more as we go through this process. But the blue area is the building footprint. There is a yellow arrow at the top of the page, or about middle of the page. It says lower school entrance. This is the lower primary entrance. This will be the entrance for grades K through 1. There's an upper school entrance, which will be for grades 2 through 3. Again, school within a school, it's really looking to create separate communities for those grade levels within the school. And as we go through the presentation, you'll see how we really focus on creating intimate learning communities for those kiddos, not only the school within a school, but then we start to break down the learning communities within those schools. Additionally, on the site plan, we have always thinking about vehicular access onto the site. We have 2 parent drop-offs. We have a parent drop-off for the upper school. We have a parent drop-off for the lower school. And then we have the bus drop off in the middle. So being very careful to make sure that we have separate parent bus drop offs to where we are not having buses and cars intermixing, which means then we have kiddos and buses and cars intermixing as well. So making sure that we separate those from a safety standpoint as well as a queuing standpoint, making sure we have plenty of room on this site to be able to queue cars and buses. Also focusing on community access to this building. There is a separate community entrance. So the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a little triangle that says community entrance. The building is set up to be able to be closed down for the classrooms at the end of the day, but the gyms and the cafeteria would be open to the public you wouldn't necessarily have access to the rest of the school. The upper left corner is the service entrance. This is where deliveries would be made, whether it be for building needs, supplies, or food service. And then you'll see a light tan color at the ends of each building. There are two designated playgrounds. There's the lower playground area, the lower school playground, the upper school playground. And then in the upper right, there's additional play area for all various programs, whether it be play or outdoor learning. The three squares in the blue are courtyards. Those are designed to be secure outdoor learning spaces as well. You can go on the next slide. So the organization of the design, we've indicated and re-emphasized that it is a school within a school. This is really looking at making sure that we execute the design statement as well as guiding principles that the educational visioning groups, as well as the that includes staff, leadership, community members, helped us arrive at. This was a series of workshops. You can see the guiding principles on the right-hand side, and then the design statement at the bottom, an intimate community of innovative, flexible, and inspirational learning neighborhoods that fosters inclusivity, collaboration, and hands-on learning. So as we were setting up this school, we thought about how do we make sure that these are intimate communities and we have learning neighborhoods within this school. So if we look at the middle of the plan, we have admin, library, music, gym, cafeteria, STEM, art. Those are shared spaces. The ones that are really shared are the admin, library, gym, and cafeteria. They're right in the middle. And then at the next layer out, you have art, music, and STEM. Those are designated to the different schools, but can be shared if needed. Again, really trying to think about flexibility. And then where you see the dashed dotted lines is the separation between those shared spaces and the classroom neighborhoods. As we laid out the building, from a code standpoint, we have to think about where we put firewalls in a building. This is also where we located the firewalls so that in the event of emergency, those doors do close and lock off, and we have now separated the classrooms from the rest of the school. Also helps for after-hour events if you want to use the library or other things. But then we go over to the left-hand side, that's the lower primary school. There are classroom neighborhoods set up, and these classroom neighborhoods, this is the area of the school that's 2 stories. We have classroom neighborhoods. The largest classroom neighborhood is 6 classrooms. The smallest is 3. So we have a series of 6, 3, and 6 on each level per school. So really breaking down that scale for the kiddos and really creating those intimate environments. So we go to the next slide. This is the overall floor plan. So this, you can see why we put it in a diagram format. There's a lot of detail here. But something else to reiterate how this plan is set up. It is set up around courtyards, and that's for various reasons. One, they create great secure outdoor learning spaces. And they also provide daylight. So all those classrooms that are along the inside of those courtyards, it provides daylight to those spaces. And as you're traveling through this school, we're always thinking about wayfinding. We'll be able to use things like colors and graphics, but we also use daylight. So as we walk around the school, we go through the first neighborhood of 6, and then we get a glimpse of the courtyard. And that's at the neighborhood of 3. And then we go through the neighborhood of 6 and come back out to the main street. And again, we have another glimpse of that courtyard. So it's a great wayfinding mechanism as well. And that's done in both schools as well as in the shared spaces. So we really have those main streets with the shared spaces and then the 2 separate schools. Next slide. And you can see that the second floor is pretty much a copy of the first floor with the classroom community set up in groups of 6, 3, and 6. One thing to note is where you see the words lower primary school, pretty much almost overlapping the building. That is where there is what we call a community or learning stair that connects the first floor and second floor of that lower school or the upper school. It happens on both sides. And what this is if you've seen, they're pretty popular in schools as well as other environments. And what they are is they're a traditional stair, but then next to that stair, oversized risers and treads, essentially so that the kids and staff can sit on that. It becomes almost like a stadium seating as part of the stair. And that becomes a gathering and presentation space, again, reinforcing community. So they're designed to hold the capacity of one of the communities within that grade level. So that would essentially accommodate 6 classrooms worth of students in that space. Next slide. And it's a very efficient way of providing that space. We're not providing a whole separate room. We're essentially extending the stair to be able to do that. And so as the design develops, we're able to come forth with a preliminary rendering. So this is showing what the upper primary entry may look like as we approach the school. So this is looking at the massing of the building and an application of materiality. But this is essentially to orient you. If you were at the parent drop-off for the upper primary school, this is where the students would be walking from that drop-off to the main entrance. There are colors that separate the different wings. We're very familiar with this in the Wentworth project that was done as well. This has been carried to the outside as well. So there is that color on the outside and inside. So students can even, before they enter the building, identify where their home is in the building. Go to the next slide. This is the lower primary entry. You can see just past it where the upper primary entrance is. There is a change in color. There's also a change in scale. So making sure that we bring the scale down for the younger learners and we differentiate these 2 entrances. So even without signage, it's very clear what the different entrances are for. And you see landscaping in the foreground. So thinking about sensory gardens and things like that and vegetation that the kids can learn from and being intentional about everything that we put on the site. Next slide. So these are the more technical drawings. These are the exterior elevations as we develop concept. We essentially get the project to a certain point to where we're able to provide cost estimates that reflect the design. These are, for those that aren't familiar with technical drawings, if you think of an elevation, it is, if I look at a building and if I were to flatten it, on that view, this is exactly what we're looking at. So these are the 4 sides of the building. And we've just added some text to help orient folks as to where the upper primary school is, the lower primary, and where those shared spaces are as we kind of go around the building. Next slide. And these are the sections. So if we were to literally take a knife and slice the building, and then at that slice, look into the building, this would be down the main street through one of the gymnasiums is that top section. And then we have a wall section that provides the detail about the assembly of the walls. And then in the middle, you can see a cross section of that 2-story classroom wing. In every move, we're being very intentional about scale, looking at how we mass the building, what heights we use, all of that to make sure that we bring that scale down for the kiddos. Next slide. The middle school, as mentioned before, and I think we've updated on this previously, and it hasn't changed. The middle school will receive some modifications through this process focused on capacity and removal of the portables. So what is accounted for in the budget are renovations to some of the spaces within the middle school to get those programs off of carts removing the portables from the site, redoing the paving under them, as well as creating an emergency access connection. Not part of this project, but will be done through CIP projects to revise that parking and parent drop off in front of the school that needs to be done regardless of capacity. Next slide. This just generally shows on the left-hand side, those are the portables that will be removed. So once the sixth grade moves to Wentworth, those will come off the site, and renovations will occur where those cross-hatched areas are to create those needed program spaces. And then this is the second floor. And so project impact, essentially what this chart shows is the capacity deficit that we are experiencing. Red line at the bottom is the existing K2 capacity. The green, solid green line is the COVID plus model from the enrollment projections. They are historic from today back, and from today moving forward, they are projections. There is a full enrollment study. You all are very familiar with it, but for those listening along, available on the website. The dotted line is the best fit model. Talking with the enrollment projection specialists, they recommended that we use the COVID plus model. They think that's the most accurate for what we will see in Scarborough. We look at the yellow line. This was looking at a solution of, or an approach of doing 4 schools instead of 1 unified school. So this would be renovating and expanding the 3 K2s and building a 4th, which would happen sequentially. So you would build the 4th school, move students, renovate, expand, move students again. That overall process is about 12 years to get us to the capacity that the unified school would provide us from day one. And so you can see that we would, starting a 4-school approach, we would still be working in a deficit, a capacity deficit. With the unified school, we have the capacity as well as area to be able to accommodate any potential additional growth. From an educational standpoint, I think you all are very familiar, being the school board, what this provides. I know that Jeff and Diane have talked about it quite a bit, but really being able to bring all the teachers under one roof, the educational opportunities that provides all of our students is huge. And as Jeff says time and time again, that it's rare that the best educational solution is also the best economical solution. So I won't go into too much more there unless you guys have other things you want to add. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. So the cost estimate, for those that have been following along the project, the last cost estimate that we provided, in today's cost estimate, there is approximately a $3.2 million difference. And the reason for that difference is originally we had a parcel number 2 that would have stormwater design and management offsite. Now that we have our geotechnical engineering data, we are able to determine that we can accommodate that onsite. Therefore, that has now moved to onsite and is no longer an offsite cost. So these cost estimates look at on-site costs for the building as well as the site design and construction. So that change in cost is from that. So you can see everything else stayed the same, and the total project cost, so construction plus soft costs, is the number you see in black there, 144,140,502. To reiterate, that does not include site procurement. That does not include off-site improvements. So we'll go on to the next slide. This just provides a summary for those that have been following along to date as to the different estimates that have come out over time and the changes in those numbers. First estimate was the very first estimate that came out upon review and due diligence of going through that and being looking for efficiencies. We were able to get that cost revised to what you see on the 615 estimate, which is in the middle column. And then that number did not change until we moved that stormwater onto the site. What that does, though, is that means we don't need to buy parcel number 2. So that will equate to a savings in site procurement. Yeah.
So I understand that. What's the cost versus the person who application and say that I think we can, that we're looking at a saving overall, because it is up there, doesn't care.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily have a savings overall, but think of it this way. That stormwater would happen on parcel 2 plus the purchase of parcel 2. Greater costs. So now we've just taken that 3.2, we've moved it over here and we've eliminated the procurement cost for that site.
So it's very but we're not.
Correct. Great question.
I would
Um,
just add one other piece. I know we talked about this in the workshop a little bit, and that is by having the wastewater on land that we fully own, there aren't shared costs. And so the original idea was that we would share this wastewater spot with folks from the Downs. And so there would be shared costs on a regular basis in terms of maintaining that. And we wouldn't necessarily have full oversight of that independently. Yes.
Yeah, the way and if it helps you better understand or the public, in the steering committee earlier this week, we talked about it being similar to an HOA. So if any of you live in a subdivision or you live in a community where you pay regularly, that's kind of how it would have been set up. But now because we can bring it on, we can control that cost hopefully a little bit more, or the maintenance at least of it, to hopefully, keep it in good shape.
So it reduced the cost, the operation cost, and it's simplified it overall. We answered your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a little bit of value engineering.
So building and site construction total project summary. So we've put this in here so that you can see, and I apologize, it's blurrier than we intended, but what this is A, B, and C. So A is the construction cost. That is on the left-hand side, the primary school, on the right-hand side, the middle school. This is the cost for the building and site construction. And then we get down to B, these are administrative costs and reserves. So right now it does not include land procurement costs, anything associated with that, which is why that reads 0. But there are other things like movable equipment. So that's your furniture, fixtures, and equipment. There's advertising and legal. There's project contingencies. My eyes aren't that good, so I can't read all of them. But then we get down to C, which is fees and services. So this is your engineering and architectural fees. This is looking at permitting and approvals, construction testing. There'll be different positions that are associated with this project. There'll be a project coordinator, there will be a clerk of the works, and there will be a commissioning agent. All of that is included in the soft costs. So we just wanted to provide a little bit more detail. So when we say soft costs, people understand what we're saying. Next slide. So cost impact and progress by town. So as we've noted, the site and offsite are not included in the number we just provided. They will be provided. The town and the school are working collaboratively to identify the site procurement cost as well as the offsite improvement cost. And the town will come forward with the final impact to taxpayers. There's different conversations and work being done on all 3 of these items right now. And that will be provided by August 16th.
Quick question on that. Is there a range that's appropriate to share at this point of what that might be, or is it?
I don't have, it's too early to be able to say what that is, or I shouldn't say early, but I don't have that information to share.
It's I think I can maybe help. It's for the life of the bond. So I think 30 years, it's, the anticipation is it would be between 2% and 4%. Majority of the years there are a tax increase. So what we would typically experience here in Scarborough, there doesn't seem to appear to be much different. There is a couple of years where there is a slighter bump, a larger bump than that 2 to 4%. So maybe like 5% ish, maybe up to 6 or getting closer to 6, but that's it.
Yeah. I was just wondering if this, maybe I'm not fully understanding what you're saying.
You're talking about the site and the offsite?
Yeah, the 1, 2, and 3, like, overall, do we think that's gonna be like somewhere between 10 and 20 million or?
Yeah, we don't know that. And that's what I
Yeah.
was referring to. We don't know that number yet, at least all of us here don't. And that's what's actively being worked on. What Shannon was referring to is the model that's been developed to start to analyze the taxpayer impact. Which all of that's in progress right now and will come forth August 16th, if not sooner. Everyone's trying to get it as quickly as we can with still doing due diligence.
My apologies. I thought you were talking about number 3.
You were ready, though.
I was right there.
So number 3 is schedule. So looking at the upcoming meetings, so the council executive session, they have a meeting on July 19th to talk about the land option agreement draft. The building committee is meeting bi-weekly just to make sure that we stay on top of any information that needs to be provided or also look at, we're looking very closely at communication, and we'll have a slide on that in a minute. Council action, so by July 31st, they're to execute the land option agreement. From there, we will have an understanding of those cost elements. And the building committee looks to finalize the total project and annual operating budget by July 31st. Council action, council will review the option agreement and votes on allowing the town manager to sign the agreement August 2nd. Building committee will meet again August 8th, and then the town finance finalize the impact of taxpayer analysis by August 16th. Also on August 16th is the council and board workshop regarding if you guys approve this project to go forward to referendum this evening, that would be the meeting to which you then request that the town council move it to referendum, and they would vote that evening. And then the building committee will get back together on August 22nd. And I talked about communication earlier. So we are putting together a schedule of community forums. I'll emphasize forums between assuming that there is a vote to move this to referendum from the week after it is approved to go to referendum to the week before the referendum. There will be weekly Q&A topics. So the next slide, and then the referendum would be November 7th. So the next slide goes over the different topics that we've put forth. So this is a collaboration of the communication committee, the building committee, town council, everything that we're hearing different folks bring up, we've distilled down into 6 themes. And so there'll be an overview of the project and then the 6 themes that you see up on the schedule, and then we'll repeat those as necessary going into the referendum. So jumping ahead, what does this look like post-referendum? So assuming that we have a successful referendum on the 7th, what does this look like afterwards? We look at the next 12 months of what we call design development for first 6 months and construction documents for the second 6 months. These are the technical drawings that are needed to go out to bid. So when we've been talking about we are getting a concept ready to identify spaces and cost and all the parameters, the first 6 months, we work on refining all of that and really dialing in a design. And the second 6 months is when we're putting together the construction documents, which is essentially what we hand to the contractors to bid, and then they will construct based on that. That bidding period is about 6 weeks, and then the project takes about 30 months to complete. So anticipating building occupancy in 2027. Yeah.
I keep thinking of these new questions. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
How does it work with a project that takes 30 months?
Mhm.
Like when you get at cost estimates, in May of 2024, do the contractors typically hold to those estimates, or are they in flux?
Yeah, with a hard bid, they hold to those estimates.
Thank you.
Once they come forward with a number, that's the number they need to provide it for. There may be, we have contingency because sometimes things happen where there's unforeseens and stuff like that, to where if it is an unforeseen, then we have that contingency to adjust the costs, but they have to hold to that price. Yeah. And so our cost estimator is estimating to that understanding when this will be and how long it will take. Good question. And so what did the building committee do this week? The building committee had a unanimous recommendation that essentially is what we read on the screen here. I'll read it out loud for those who may not be able to see it, but essentially later on your agenda is where you will be voting. Essentially, the building committee is asking the school board to move this project forward to referendum, essentially going to the town council and asking that they vote to put this on the November referendum. So on July 11th, the building committee unanimously voted in favor of the following recommendation to the school board. Do you support the proposed concept design for the Scarborough School strategic K-8 solution, which includes a new K-3 primary school and renovations at the middle school to support grade level reconfiguration and removal of portable classrooms, with an estimated total project cost for building construction and site construction of up to $144,140,502 to be funded by local bonds, with the understanding that site procurement costs and off-site costs will continue to be refined in collaboration with the school board, town, and landowners, and added to the total project costs listed above prior to referendum. And so that is our update for this evening.
All right, thank you, Lisa. So as Lisa said, we will vote later on. So for right now, are there any questions for Lisa on her presentation?
I don't have any questions on this presentation. However, I just wanted to go back to our workshop, and if you can kind of recap for the public who might just be tuning into this session tonight, what Plan B would look like should this fail, what we would be looking at.
I will turn that back over to Jeff and Diane and probably Shannon to address.
Thanks. You want to start or you want me to?
You start.
So Plan B, would we still, if this fails, if the vote is no, I think it's very imperative for people to understand a no vote does not equal $0. So if there is a no vote and this fails at referendum, what would happen is we still have those children coming into Scarborough. We still have no place to put them and we are still out of classroom space and still out of land. So Plan B would be to locate another spot within the Scarborough, potentially land we already own as a town, to put what we would call like a portable classroom school. So we would have to bring in and buy temporary portable buildings that could house students. We would have to redistrict the students the families that are currently living in Scarborough. What that would mean is that some people that are within our community would be sending their kids to a portable school building. You would have to create the infrastructure for those portables to be able to exist. So cafeterias, gym space, office space, special education space, special space. So in the short term, it might look like a more attractive price tag if it's the portables roughly are 325 to 350 million. That does not include the infrastructure. That does 1,000, excuse me.
For
I
how
just saw
many?
Todd's eyes get really large. I apologize. I meant 1,000, 325 to 350
Per portable.
1,000 per portable. But that does not include the infrastructure. That does not include the hookups to water, sewer, cable, portable.
Yeah, thanks for that update. It just sounds like this would obviously be a more fiscally responsible thing for us to do in the long term, because all of our Band-Aid fix-its with extra portables would be a significant cost.
Yes.
It's a year, right, it's a year-to-year Band-Aid ending with potentially significant massive increases in operational costs to maintenance costs, you name it. In the end, you know, the impact of doing nothing and not being planful about our facilities needs would far exceed the tax impact of this project, moving this project forward.
And you'd be spending that money now, and then you'd have to spend money to do a permanent solution that the longer you wait may cost more.
And I mean, and Diane, I'm not going to speak for Diane as well, but we're educators, and the impact of this ultimately on the learning environment for our staff and students just does not meet our needs and the needs of our learners, period. It just wouldn't.
And I think one thing we need to talk about too is if we do, if it is a no vote, and then what you're talking about would fix, would just be like a K2 solution, correct? So it wouldn't even address the sixth grade, anything with the middle school. So it's not, it's bigger
not-
than,
Right, yeah, exactly that. It's not a strategic.
so it may fix, it's a Band-Aid for that, but it doesn't even touch other parts of the problem that we're running into now.
That's a
Very
great
true.
point. Yeah, it's a great point, John. Thank you. Thanks, Jenna. All right, are there any other questions? All right, thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
All right. Bear with me 1 second. Sorry, I lost my slide. All right. Agenda item 8.0 is the superintendent's report. Can you share my screen? Okay, I'll hand it over to Jeff.
So I have just one slide to share this evening. Wanted to take an opportunity for some staff recognition. And what's really kind of affirming about some of these awards that I'm just going to briefly describe and mention some of our staff members. Just for being recognized for your professional contributions or beyond, well beyond actually the town limits of Scarborough. So we have routinely have educators that are nominated for awards, that win awards, that are statewide, or even more so. And so I've got 4 of our educators this evening that I just wanted to acknowledge and recognize for awards that other organizations have recognized their efforts for. Michelle was recognized by the Maine Education Association, the statewide Teachers Association, with the 2023 Human and Civil Rights Award this spring for work with civil rights, for work with kids, work on equity and inclusion efforts district-wide, you name it. And that, again, like we don't have much influence over, whether or not these faculty have earned these awards from other organizations, right? So this is really just an acknowledgement of the work that they do as educators. Elise won the Maine Art and Education Association's Art Educator of the Year Award, which is a statewide organization this spring. Catherine has been nominated for Maine's Psychological Association's Educator Recognition Award, which is focusing on educators who are looking at establishing positive relationships among kids and staff and culture, and effective integration of academic and social emotional instruction. We've talked a lot about social emotional learning in our schools and a lot of work that we're doing K-12, and then also leadership and advocacy. And then Christy Zavaznik was nominated was chosen as the School Champion of the Year award with a mentoring program, ACE, which architecture, construction, and engineering, where mentors, it's an organization that pairs students with mentors who are interested in going into architecture, construction, engineering pursuits post high school. So she's been a champion of that organization and setting kids up with mentors and earned recognition from at least over 30 or 40 schools that are affiliated with this organization. So I just love taking the opportunity to note the impact that our educators are having, not just on Scarborough kids, but on other organizations and educators across the entire state.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions or comments for Jeff? I'll just say we love hearing about this as well. So this is really exciting news. So thank you for sharing. All right. Sorry, agenda item 9.0 is the chair's report. which is me. Sorry, I'm flipping between. I don't have much of an update. We've heard a lot tonight about the building, and that's quite frankly where our focus has been. And will continue to be between now and August. But I did just want to tell you, I'd mentioned at our last meeting that the MSMA annual fall conference was coming up, but we didn't have dates yet. Well, now it happened like Friday after our meeting. So as per usual, right? Of love how it normally would go. But it is set for October 26th and the 27th. It will be in person in Augusta at the Civic Center. All right, we are going to switch to the committee updates now. Some are going to be verbal, I know, without slides, and some are not. So agenda item 10.0 are committee reports. I'll start with those that are have the slides, and then we'll move to the verbal from there. So first is communications. Jenna, is that you?
Yep, so our last meeting was June 8th. I believe we had a lot of connectivity issues that day, so it was a very brief meeting. But it was a good ending to kind of the school year. And then we're supposed to meet this afternoon, but we have rescheduled it to next Thursday for July 20th. And we're gonna prepare for the fall and start off strong with Spotlight Awards in September. So we'll be updating our forms for the following school year.
I think there are any questions for Jenna? Great. Finance Committee.
All right, so we last met on June 5th. Feels like forever ago. We had a brief agenda, and it was basically to discuss the feedback that we had received from the town council on the budget and their requests about, looking at some various scenarios. So after a lot of discussion, we decided to proceed with the recommended. We decided to proceed with recommending the current budget we had in place, and that budget was approved. So nice job to Kate and Jeff and Diane and the team. And I know Freyla did a bunch of calls on the back end doing some lobbying. So when we went to vote with the town council, so great job to everybody. And our next meeting is in September. We got to pick a date yet, but that's the plan.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Carolyn? All right. Curriculum. Ryan.
All right, so there's a lot up there, but most of it can be summed up just with the summer programming. So we last met June 14th. It was our last meeting with Monique. So we said farewell to her and welcome to Katie. We had gotten, you can see up there all the numbers. So at this point, these programs are running and they're currently happening. Some of those numbers have changed as well. We anticipated from our last meeting. So you'll see that there were different staff opportunities, whether it was team and department curriculum work, literacy workshops that we're going to run throughout the summer. There were a variety. She said there were over 30 different events this summer that were open to staff. In terms of student programming, you could see the variety of offerings that were there, but I think aside from the students, I think what I had picked up on more was just the involvement by the staff. And so you could see really large numbers, especially towards the bottom there, which are going to be needed for things like Kinder Camp with, as we're talking about increasing enrollments, but high school recovery credit as well. We had 30 students there, 6 staff. Something else that's an important program. So I think it's nice for the community to see what is offered, especially if your kids, for instance, are in elementary or in middle school, what might be offered to them when they get to different levels within our district. So it's another reason why I wanted to make sure that we shared that up there so they understand as your kids grow within our district, there are opportunities in the summer for them potentially. In terms of the ESEA application, we know that we're going to have a full-time early literacy and math teacher at Blue Point. We've had them in the past. And then we're also going to have a K through 12 SEL specialist. But what we did get recently, and I believe you guys, I had shared the email with you, is Katie had found out that with the help of Kate Bolton, we had some state allocation and funds that were carried over. And so Eight Corners is actually going to end up with a full-time Ed Tech 3, which was not initially planned, which is great. So really great positive to see, especially again with these increasing enrollments. The external curriculum guide, which we've had a lot of positive feedback on, was updated slightly. And then we also made note that in the fall, we'll most likely have to update that again. And our next meeting is going to be 9/16. It'll be our first one led by Katie, and it'll be 3:30 on Zoom. And there's a couple things that you could see up there that we're planning to discuss.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions for Brian? So was the Ed Tech 3, I can't remember, was that one of the budgeted positions that we no longer?
So that is actually, it's going to be funded with Title I funds, and it will be an early literacy ed tech to do work similar to the early literacy teacher that has been working at Blue Point this year. So that as we notice students coming into kindergarten who are a little bit behind in skills, that we can help with some really early intervention so that they can be more successful right from the onset.
So I think this also goes back, and when Katie had shared this great news with us, she had also emphasized the fact that most of our meetings before, our conversation before this in our workshop, and then today also with Lisa presenting, we're talking about a school and the value of bringing everybody together, right? Some of these might not become an issue when we can actually consolidate the school, because for the community that might not know, the reason why maybe Eight Corners was chosen, and I use that in quotations, or Blue Point, is because of the need that is showing within our district in those certain areas. But when we consolidate, the need becomes accessible to everybody. These services, I should say, become accessible to everybody at one location, not just these individual schools. So, it's just one more feather in the cap to realize why there's a lot of value to consolidate these schools.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Before we hop here, so I know Freyla policy, you had an update.
Yeah, so the policy committee met on June 20th to continue, and I'm not going to go over our meeting in too much detail because you're about to preview it when you start the first reading. So I'll go through all the policies again. We love our policies. And you have a bunch for second reading as well. So we are chugging along. We finished all of the required state mandated policies. So as of our second reading, next meeting, we'll be up to date with all of our policies. We're planning to go back around, take policies up, kind of the fires as needed as they pop up. And then also we're going to plan to review all the policies. Some of them haven't been touched for 20 years. And even if we just dust them off to say, yep, that's a great policy, I think we should put fresh eyes on them. And I think we're doing pretty good work at a pretty good clip. I think Diane has gotten us really organized, which is allowing us to kind of fly through these policy meetings, which everyone knows how much I love policy. I'll know at DEI as well. We were supposed to have a meeting on Tuesday. We were unable to have that meeting due to technical difficulties. It's been rescheduled to next Tuesday. We're actually really close to completing the strategic plan, the governance document, and the structure and responsibility document, which we then expect will be presented to this board for review, approval, and sort of set us on a good path. So I think we're in good hands. I think we're struggling as a younger committee of trying to figure out summer meeting schedules. 21 people is unwieldy, but there's a lot of good effort, and two of the members were two of the awardees that were highlighted in the report. So we've got some really great members on that committee, and I'm excited about what the work we're doing.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Freyla? All right, and I will just add on this, first, are there any liaison reports?
Yes. Legislative, we have two, there were two pieces of legislation that I was asked to sort of keep some eyes on. One was the referendum budget overhaul that died between the houses, which means that they wasn't voted on by both houses. And so it's dead. It may be brought again and eventually it would not be next year because that's for emergency legislation. We may see it again in a couple of years. The other, and that was LD 1748. LD 974, that was the minimum ed tech pay. I did not get an update. They ran the table of appropriations on Tuesday night, and we're still trying to find out what happened at that table. There was not enough money on the table to fund the bill. So it's unlikely it was passed. If it was passed, it could not have been passed in the form it was because the state was going to provide funding for the first year. And to the tune of about $80 million. They only had $15 million on the table, so they could not have fully funded, they could not have passed it as it was. What I need to find out, and I'll find out for everyone, is did it die on the appropriations table or was it held over? It can be held over till next session, to be funded next time, they pass the budget next year. And so I don't go into a whole lot of detail, but when, after the budget's passed, which was signed by the governor on Monday, the rest of the money is then on the appropriations table. They allocate amongst the hundreds of bills that are there. It's called running the table, and they did that very quickly on Tuesday. Well, very quickly in like 12 hours in the wee hours of the morning on Tuesday. But we're still not, I don't have final, they haven't been able to update us on every single piece of legislation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? So we have a new liaison position that you do not see on this list yet, but you will see starting in our next meeting, and that is the Town Council Ad Hoc, Community Center Ad Hoc Committee. And the board does have a non-voting position on that committee that the Town Council generously included us in. So John is going to be our representative for the board. So thank you very much. We're very appreciative of that. And so you will see that liaison position up here. And then our two student representatives both actually would like to serve on the policy committee. So both students are going to be joining us in policy. All right. Agenda item 11.0 is new business. So 11.1 is a motion to approve the building project referendum to go to the town council. So I'm going to put it back up here for everybody to read. Oh, wait, no, I'm not in this. I'm sorry. Do it in here. All right. So do I have a motion to approve the building steering committee recommendation as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion about this? I will just say, I think that we've everybody here, everybody on the building steering committee has spent a lot of time making the case for this. And this feels like an exciting, like, I feel like we're finally there and we're going to get to go to town council and we're going to get to ask for them to approve this. And it makes me very happy that this was a unanimous vote from the building steering committee. I'm hoping for the same thing going forward tonight and for the same thing with town council going forward, because I think this is a long time coming. For sure.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody's efforts in this so far, and there's still a long way to go, but
Yeah.
you guys have really put in a ton of work and research, and I really commend you guys for it. I love that it addresses our capacity needs, our staffing needs, our growth and development needs, our programming needs. It addresses everything. And I think we really need to have a really big push for this come November.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to add that if anybody either listening or those of you up here as well that haven't had a chance to take a peek at the most recent building committee that we had, there were also other pictures that were included that Lisa had included that I think really just bring this to life. And there were a lot of positive comments from those of us on the board saying, wow, that really helps us visualize what we have in mind. So I would encourage you to go grab that video and just peek at it. I believe it's a little more towards the end of the evening, but for those of you in the public, we saw a sneak peek tonight, but there were some more pictures as well, which I think helps you understand what a potential courtyard could look like, or what those risers look like within the hallways. And it really does help you understand that this school, although you're hearing people talk mega school, it doesn't feel that way. It truly, you start to understand the concept of a school within a school. And again, similar to Shannon, there's many people who have been here way longer than me. And just in my limited time of being on the steering committee, the amount of preparation. I just appreciate that on the part of everybody who comes and presents on a consistent basis. I mean, we all have full-time jobs, and I know we're all juggling a lot, and every single time I feel like the board has been prepared to answer questions. I feel like us up here have been prepared when it comes to meeting with town council. And again, similar to what Jenna said, you know, that this is just the start of it. You know, all of your help up here, and then as well as the public, if you're on board with this, and we feel you should, you know, we're looking for you to jump on board with us verbally and continue to share that within the community, because we really need that.
Thank you, Brian.
I'd say a couple of things. The first is, I think this body tasked the building committee years ago, at this point, 8 years ago, if I'm remembering correctly, with a job, a big job to vision, you know, Dana's at the helm with a lot of help from others to put together a plan. And they've worked tirelessly to do that. And since I've come on to this with Lisa's help as well, I don't want to leave anyone out. There's been a lot of work done. I know I've said this before, that I was not very keyed into the building project before joining this board. I knew we needed one. I knew about it. There were rumblings, but I didn't really see it until I got here. And every meeting, I feel like every meeting and most workshops, we dedicate ourselves as our number one priority of this body to get this to referendum this fall. And the case has been made on every level, from the purpose of the school, which is educate the students, and also it's fiscally responsible. But something that Shannon said to me struck me at the end of the meeting, where sort of like, we have to work together at this workshop to get this done, and referencing really the town council and the Board of Ed. And I really, I want to push back a little bit. I agree with Shannon most of the time, but I think it goes beyond that. The town council and the school board are responsible for leading this town into meeting the needs of the citizens, which includes the education of our youngest citizens. But this is the responsibility of all of us, every single resident of Scarborough, every taxpayer, every person who lives here, every person who spends time in this town, and not only because they are responsible for educating the kids who live here, and they should be proud of that responsibility, but because this is really an investment in the future of our town and the future of our state. Because when we educate our youngest students and our middle students and our high school students to the best of their abilities, they go on to do great things. And they cannot go on to do great things from portable classrooms that don't meet their needs while they're separated out, and inefficiencies, and the town cannot afford to continue to pay extra money to support operations that are way outdated and do not, and undermine the very mission of this body, which is to educate the students. So the only pushback is, I think it's everyone's responsibility.
I will gladly take that pushback.
And I
Thank
just
you.
want, I'd like to add on, you know, absolutely second everything everybody has said, but I also want to add about the collaborative working together with the town council, and how I think that has added a lot of value to the process. Been challenged on some things and asked to provide more information, and which is extra work. But I think at the end of the day, it's providing the community with more information, more answers to questions. You know, if somebody has them, probably 100 other people do as well. So I just want to recognize the town council and the role that they've played in pushing this, and being in favor of it, and pushing for, you know, answering to questions that we may not have thought of, and maybe didn't have a direct answer to articulate, but now we do. So I think that's important to recognize as well.
Thank you, Carolyn. All right. All in favor of accepting the building steering committee's recommendation? It is unanimous. Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Agenda item 11.2 is the first reading of policy JKF, disciplinary removal of students with disabilities. Do I have a motion to approve the first reading?
So moved.
Second. Okay. Any discussion? I will turn it over to Freyla to kind of talk through what this is.
We love our policy. This is a really short one. It's a very, there's an attachment which we're gonna look at next, which is actually the policy. This is just, it's statutorily required that individuals who are identified as disabled who require, they have extra protection under the ADA. There has to be specific rules about how their disciplinary measures happen, including their removal, and this policy references that. And we made virtually no changes. We added our school name. We changed a may to a shall.
Right, is there any discussion on this? All in favor of approving? Thank you, that is unanimous. All right, agenda item 11.3 is the first reading of policy JKFR, disciplinary removal of students with disabilities administrative procedures. So first I'll turn it to you before I.
You need a motion.
Motion. Well, do you want to explain it first?
Oh, sure.
I did it out of order.
That's right. This is longer. This is actually the policy that we're changing. The first one just references the document. This is all statutorily statute. This is required by the main law. There's virtually no changes to it. We made a couple of tweaks on page 3 of 4, which is really page 3 because 4 is just a reference. And that's, we changed a little bit of the definitions and cleaned up some of the language, but we didn't change any of the subject of meeting, mainly because we couldn't. Because it's, again, it's statutory. So if what we did in section 6 on paragraph B is talked about, we just reordered this sentence to make it read more nicely. It said the child has been subjected to a series of removals. We changed that there is a series of removals that constitute a pattern. We just literally inverted the sentence and now it reads a little bit nicer. But again, no substantive changes, and the statutory cites in case you need to fall asleep tonight at the bottom, in case you want to start reading them.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy JKFR, disciplinary removal of students with disabilities administrative procedure?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, it's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 11.4 is the first reading of policy CBIP, evaluation of the superintendent procedure.
I'm super excited about this policy. We talked, no, I really am. So we talked about, this is how I get enjoyment out of life. So this is the policy we talked about when we did our evaluation this year about changing the deadlines to make them more in line with getting it done timelier, to move it back a little bit so it doesn't correspond with the end of the year quite so squarely. And so what this does is it changes 2 deadlines. The first one is that it will meet and set goals and objectives for the fiscal year no later than the last day in September. That's in line with our new election cycle. So we are now moved from November-ish to June. So that'll puts us a little bit in better position for that. And then also it changes the day or the month for that executive session to perform the evaluation to May. And it will move our portion of that preparation work really to April, which should be a little bit later than trying to cram it into May and June, because that was kind of not fun for anybody this year. That's my excitement. That's my most exciting policy.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy CBIP, evaluation of the superintendent procedure?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, it's unanimous. All right, I think I'm looking at an old version of the agenda. So the policy JK, we were tabling until August. So I think it's agenda item 11.5 is the second reading of policy JK.
Not JK, it was a different one that we tabled.
Oh, I'm
JIC
sorry.
is what-
Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Pardon me. The 11.5 then is the second reading of policy JK, which is student discipline. Did you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, and JIC is the one that was tabled for a meet. We talked about this last time.
Yeah.
We're gonna get something done and then it'll come back to y'all. So JK is student discipline. You've seen this. We made no substantive changes. You had no comments for us in the first reading. So we went to the policy meeting, looked at it and said there was nothing to discuss. So unless something has popped up between the last time we've read it and this time, this is, again, mostly, this one is not completely statutory. We have to have a student disciplinary policy. Pieces of it are statutory, pieces of it are more elective. But again, I'm happy to, if there's anything that needs to be addressed in terms of the restraint or seclusion or pieces of that, those are very statutory. Other pieces of it are a little less, but again, happy to take any questions with the second reading, so I don't have so much.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy JK student discipline?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, thank you. It's unanimous. 11.6 is the second reading of policy JKD, the suspension of students.
This is the same second reading. There was no comments or feedback that we had last time, so we didn't spend a lot of time discussing it. I've made no changes since the first reading. Or the policy committee hasn't voted out any changes. It's the first meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions. This is again, mostly statutory with the 10 days and such on.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy JKD, suspension of students?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, it's unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 11.7 is the second reading of policy JKE, which is the expulsion of students.
Same thing, second reading. There was no feedback last time. This is the one where we did do a little more handiwork to it. We struck out the optional paragraphs and then we changed the superintendent's discretion to change it. But I had no feedback about that, so we didn't, again, it's the same thing as first reading. There's been no changes.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy JKE, expulsion of students?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, thank you, it's unanimous. Agenda item 11.8 is the second reading of policy JKER, which is the expulsion guidelines.
This is the step-by-step on how you expulsion, how you expel a student. And would be what this board would have to follow. We made a couple of process changes. We made the identification of conflicts earlier in the process and did a couple of things that are just complete process oriented. But again, those were explained last time. This is identical to the first reading and I got no feedback, so I don't think you want to hear me go into how we do administrative hearings again.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy JKER, expulsion guidelines?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, thank you, it's unanimous. All right, agenda item 11.9 are appointments. 11.9.1 is a middle school, high school ESL teacher.
All right, so Yvette Barone has been selected to fill this newly created position. Ms. Barone received her Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Administration from Husson University and her Master's of Education in Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages from USM. She's worked at the Scarborough High School as an Ed Tech 3 since 2012 and completed her teaching internship this spring at Gorham Schools.
Do I have a motion to approve the middle school, high school ESL teacher as
So moved.
presented?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, it's unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 11.9.2 is the high school student assistance counselor.
So Abigail Brown has been selected to fill this position due to resignation. Ms. Brown received her Bachelor's of Science in Social Work from the University of Maine and her Master's of Social Work from UNE. She's been working as a social worker between an elementary school and a middle school for RSU 16 school districts since 2019.
Perfect. Do I have a motion to approve the high school student assistance counselor as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, thank you, it's unanimous. Agenda item 11.9.3 is the K-5 resource librarian.
Megan Blakemore has been selected to fill this position due to a resignation. Ms. Blakemore received her Bachelor's of Arts in English and Comparative Literature at Columbia University, Master's in Library Science from Simmons University, and currently working towards her doctoral program from Simmons. She's been working as a librarian since 2004, most recently in South Portland. She has a number of professional publications and has mentored future school librarians.
Do I have a motion to approve the K-5 resource librarian as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, thank you, it's unanimous. Agenda item 11.9.4 is the high school social studies teacher.
Brianna Belafontaine-Krupski has been selected to fill this position due to a resignation. Ms. Belafontaine-Krupski received her Bachelor's of Arts in History and Political Science and her Master's of Science in Education from the University of Southern Maine. Started her teaching career in Buckfield, Maine in 2011 and currently has been working at Bonnie Eagle High School as an honors economics, AP government and politics and U.S. government teacher since 2014. She's been part of the National Constitution Center since 2020.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the high school social studies teacher as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, it's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 11.9.5 is again, the high school social studies teacher.
All right, Nicole Schmidt has been selected to fill this position due to a resignation. Ms. Schmidt received her Bachelor of Arts in both English and History from the University of Maine, Orono, and her Master's in Special Education from University of Southern Maine. She's worked as a history and English teacher since 1994, most recently at Thornton Academy, where she taught both English and history to grades 11 and 12.
Perfect. Do I have a motion to approve the high school social studies teacher as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, it's unanimous. Thank you. 11.9.6 is the Oak Hill Players Director.
So this is 2 stipends for Jonathan Meal, director and choreographer.
Do I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Perfect, thank you. And then agenda item 12.0 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Perfect, thank you so much.